Out. So, switching topics a little bit, what was the civil rights movement like in Milwaukee? Do you remember any like bad
Very much
stories?
so, because during that civil rights movement, uh, uh, industry was in need of manpower, and a lot of colored people came up here,
Hmm.
and you had a different climate before the civil rights movement. Anytime you had work in the ghetto or the core or whatever we used to call it, you were like a hero because you used to find gas leaks
Hmm.
and so on and so forth, or connect stoves and that. But now you had a different mentality there, where uh, uh, I wouldn't say you had a different attitude,
Hmm.
and now you had to be a little concerned because these people were thinking, and evidently they were being abused throughout the years, and so you had to wind up, you know what I mean, is where there are times you felt like they were anti-white, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? So, you know what I mean, is the attitude was different.
Hmm. All right, so I know you like watching the news and learning about history. What would you say is one of the best slash worst things that happened in history that happened during your lifetime?
Well, during my lifetime, I tell you, I really feel that you know, I've been blessed. You know what I mean? There were many times where, when it happened, like I was in peril,
Hmm.
it didn't bother me that much. But in later years, when I think back on it, there were times I had some close calls, and I can't. It happened many times. You know what I mean? That when I say many, I'm meaning that I could say at least a half a dozen times when I think back on that particular subject or that event, uh, that I had a damn good chance of uh, not being here today.
Hmm. Do you remember like one of the best times? Like, do you remember like a president that you thought was like one of the best, or that you?
No, I always, throughout the years, I could never figure out why people would be against one of our uh, Roosevelts, and that's the second Roosevelt. That was Franklin Delano
Hmm.
Roosevelt, and he got in about 1932 and 33, and he not only do I think he was a good president, but I couldn't understand why some people were objecting to what he was doing. And though to me, like, there's a handful of ideal presidents, and he was one of them.
Hmm.
And he was uh, the only president that actually was elected four times.
That's cool. That's cool. All right. So ending our interview, you just kind of said who is someone you respect, but do you have another like I don't know? You can say political leader, or I don't know, family member or someone in history that you like really look up to and you respect.
Well, let's stay with the presidents.
Okay.
Uh, Roosevelt,
Mhm.
I wasn't in politics too much,
Mhm.
but then when Kennedy, uh, there was something about this guy Kennedy. Being human, he had a lot of faults, but
Mhm.
uh, in my mind, he represented a person that wanted to help people. And I did a lot of reading about him, and I know that he was a very sick man in his youth, and that developed him. He did a lot of reading, and I would have to say that I think he was like an intellect. Money wise, he had more money than Rockefeller, so his goal was to maybe do what Roosevelt did for the people. during the Depression,
Mhm.
and he was interested in being a good president, and he was for the people. And then, most naturally, uh, politics, what it is, I didn't know much about it. But then when in reading about that Kennedy, there was something about that man that God works in strange ways, because he was in uh, uh, I'm stuttering now, but he was in a position where he illustrated to you that he was working for the working man. He wanted to be the working man. But then, even when and I'm talking about events that were in the make before he was president, and I'm talking about Cuba, and I'm talking about the missile crisis and all that, and he proved himself in the way he handled it, and so on and so forth.
Do you remember when he was assassinated?
19 in November 22nd, 1963,
Mm-hmm.
12:30 in the afternoon, and I've done a lot of reading about him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really, in my way of thinking, assassinated because prior to being president, he was in a position where uh, when he took office, there were events that were already in progress that were, and I'm talking about being involved with Vietnam and
Mm-hmm.
being involved with Cuba and so on and so forth. And he was really, his way of thinking was that he was trying to be the leader that trying to avoid wars and that and so on and so forth. But more importantly was that I think that that's why he was assassinated, was because he was upsetting those programs that were already in place before he got in. And then secondly, I'm going to have to talk about Eisenhower a little bit, because Eisenhower was before him, and Eisenhower, at later years, he was not too well. And I think that the government, the CIA, and so on and so forth, they were just running a little bit wild. And I think that in his trying to change whatever things were going to be happening with this, like renegades and all that in the CIA, that they figured that they had to eliminate him.
All right. Thank you for interviewing me.